show my screen at all, or just we're going to go in like this? That's fine. Let's just do it this way. I'd like to welcome everybody to I guess webinars that we're planning for the winter months with livestock. We're going to be calling it Cattle Chat, and we're going to be doing them once a month. We're hoping to bring some issues that are, I guess, important for that time period, whether it be we get into calving or whether we have some feeding issues or even just some budgets. So we plan on doing this for the winter months right through till spring. And for today's talk, we actually have Dr. Roy Lewis with us, and Dr. Roy Lewis is a large animal vet, and he's been a vet since '81, and he is now working with Merck Animal Science, and yes, through Heather Davis, we were able to get Dr. Roy to come on, and he's going to talk to us today about vaccines and then about parasites. There's some interesting things happening with some of the products we're using, and so it's it's something that we thought would be good to get out to the people that are listening today. So I guess with that, Roy, if you're ready, you can take over and we'll get started.
Hello, Roy, are you there? I'm not sure what's happened. Hello?
I got his screen, but I don't have.
I'm not sure. It shows that he's online. Hi, Heather, are you there?
Hi, Heather, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I think we just lost Roy.
Okay, let me try calling him.
Well, Lionel, would you like me to show your screen or for a minute, or?
Sure. Excuse me. Like I mentioned at the start, Cattle Chat is something that we came up with as a way of getting information out to producers in hopefully a timely fashion, and that's why we are trying to do it through the webinar series here. We been doing our webinar series on growing concerns over the past 3 or 4 years, and we've gotten to get a fairly good following of producers. With that webinar, we talk about cropping conditions throughout the growing season, and we try to do it on in timely basis. Whatever we're talking about at the time is usually what's happening in the field. So I think with the Cattle Chat, we're hoping to do the same thing. We're hoping to talk about issues that producers are, I guess, facing with their cattle at certain times throughout the year. We figure we'd start off in the wintertime because at that time we hope that producers might have some time to be able to spend with us. We're hoping to, I guess, do most of them through the noon hour time period because this gives a lot of people time to, I guess, you know, get some chores done and then get and be able to watch it. I think we have Dr. Roy back, so I am going to turn things over back to him. And go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, go ahead, Roy. You just need to show your screen.
Okay.
Not sure what happened there, but we lost you, but there you go. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Well, good. Good morning, everybody. And again, I'm happy to be on this. And sorry about the glitch to start with. Something went wrong, I think, on my end. Apologize, everybody. I'm using a mouse. Hopefully, you can still see that to point out stuff. And it's an Edmonton Oilers mouse, so I apologize for that for all you Jets fans. But here we go. And I'll try to give you half an hour on vaccinating your cow herd. And really, it's the bull battery as well. So I want to kind of stress that as well. And then we're going to go right into parasite control and some interesting things that Merck's done across Canada on parasites, and actually more specifically what we found in Manitoba. So just going to click here to make up some time. But as far as vaccination of your cattle herd goes, it's way better to prevent disease than treat it. So really, vaccination is probably, in my mind, the best form of kind of biosecurity you can have on your farm. And what I'm going to talk about today are the main diseases that we vaccinate for pretty much across Canada. So there's going to be specifics to Manitoba, Alberta, and that sort of thing, but I'm going to talk specifically on ones that are pretty much across the country and into the state. So that's the ones we're going to count on as what we're going to do here. Keep in mind, a lot of these diseases may be incurable, or if not, they require an expensive thing to treat, or they may cause abortions, all these sorts of things. So either way, they're an economic loss to you and your farm. So vaccination is a great way to prevent a lot of these things. In order to get a maximum immunity from your vaccines, and this would mean any vaccine that you're using, we have to keep in mind that the cows have to be in a sound state of nutrition, and with that, parasites being down to an absolute minimum, because they can rob the animal of nutrition, and as a result, don't get good immunity to vaccines. We're going to minimize stress when we vaccinate them, and that's why calves, we try to not do it at weaning, or at least that's maybe the second shot. So they've had a priming shot before, and a lot of the diseases, if you're going to booster, you may do at weaning, but they've had that one shot before they get to the weaning time. I'm always kind of an advocate of beef quality assurance whenever we vaccinate. This would be with vaccines or antibiotics or anything that you would inject into an animal. We raise beef primarily. The purebred guys sell to commercial guys who then raise beef, of course. So we want to use the less desirable cuts. We want to go in the neck if possible. We want to change our needles fairly often. We want to try to get products that are given subcutaneously, and nowadays pretty much all the vaccines are subcutaneous with the exception of the scour vaccines. And again, changing the needles every 10 to 15, that might be every 20 to 25, but for sure do it when they're dull or bent or dirty and that sort of thing. Don't try to straighten them and reuse them. Follow withdrawal periods, and there's withdrawals on the vaccines as well. And keep the vaccines at the right temperature, which means, more importantly, not freezing them. They can be warmed up a little bit before you're putting them in the animal, but don't freeze them, because that will destroy the vaccine, and you're basically given the going through that for no reason whatsoever. If you're using modified live vaccines, when you rehydrate them, when you mix the water, the distilled water in with the powder, make sure and only do enough that you're going to be using in 1 or 2 hours. So try to run out at lunchtime and then start if you're doing a big herd type of thing. And another thing that's come up just recently, don't disinfect the needles between shots like you would if you're given an implant, because of the fact that you can destroy that modified live vaccine and not get the worth out of it. So the other real important thing, just again, if you're giving more than one vaccine on one side of the neck, make sure and do it at least 6 inches, 10 to 15 centimeters apart, so the vaccines don't mix, because they can destroy one another. And don't use one vaccine and one syringe and then switch halfway through the day, because certain vaccines will destroy the others, especially the killed bacterians like the Clostridial or blackleg vaccines can destroy modified live vaccines if they come in contact with them. And I did this site here is just showing the two primary, really the primary and secondary sites. So if you're given a couple vaccines, I usually kind of have a tendency to go high and low on that number one site, but keeping that distance apart. And the thing is, to prevent it from freezing, there's some neat things that have been devised over the years, but this is a fridge that a farmer rigged up with the heat light. and it's got shells on it. You can keep it closed, fairly well insulated in the winter, and that bulb keeps it from freezing. You can kind of organize your stuff, keep the syringes apart, that sort of thing. And again, as I mentioned about biosecurity, it's probably the most important thing from preventing diseases from either coming onto your ranch or farm or keeping them at bay so that you don't have them running through the herd. We all know about the foot and mouth deal, which was really the epitome of biosecurity from visitors and things. But vaccination to prevent disease is a day-to-day, everyday thing that you should be doing to prevent it from coming out to your farm. This list is the one I'm not even going to talk about, but it just shows you the huge repertoire, except the foot rot vaccine halfway down for bulls. The huge, massive amount of things you can vaccinate for. This is where you have to rely on your veterinarian producers in the area, knowing what they're vaccinating for and what is prevalent in your area. Otherwise, you can get carried away with lots of vaccines. We're trying to do the most economic bang for the buck, and that's why a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, including Merck, and that's why you see the Vista logo at the bottom here, they come up with vaccines that are multivalent. So in other words, they protect a bunch of the diseases that are commonly prevalent in your area, so you don't have to give that many shots. I'm going to just quickly talk about the blackleg or clostridial vaccines. These are usually a 7 or 8, or there's a product called Covaxin Plus, which is a 9-way vaccine. One of the first vaccines that was ever developed, and we all know about blackleg. If they get it, they usually die. Veterinarians cannot save these things with antibiotics. So, and I see it every year, and I'll get some pictures of them coming up here. The blackleg organisms are around all over the place. They're in the soil and spores. They can lay there for years and years dormant, and then the cattle pick them up, and if they are not vaccinated, they're susceptible and will die of the toxins that these bacteria produce. So this was a calf that, and I wanted to, again, clostridial vaccines are all not created equal. So there's the blackleg and all the organisms that kind of go with. Tetanus is only in some of the vaccines, and that's where you have to watch. Products like Casvax 8, Covaxin Plus will have tetanus in it. And if you're banning calves, and this was a calf that was banned that did not have a clostridial vaccine, specifically tetanus, and it died of tetanus. It's still alive here, but this producer lost 2 or 3 who went ahead and vaccinated and didn't have any others. But and we commonly see it with banning. This is a calf in the fall. The owner, good producer, didn't. It was wet in the spring. Didn't vaccinate his calves. Really good doing black Angus calf, and had This is blackleg involving the shoulder. So it is out there. There's blackleg that you see in that split back leg. Blackleg, every year I see it, and every year we try to get more and more to vaccinate. There's still a number of cattle that aren't vaccinated for blackleg or the clostridial disease. It's a very inexpensive vaccine, so it's a good one to use. And just briefly mention about IBR and PI3. Those are 2 IBRs, and one you probably all know can cause upper respiratory disease, pneumonia in calves, and abortion in cows. So it's really a 2-faceted disease to protect against, and it's one that we always want to think about as far as putting it in our vaccination protocol. PI3, kind of a mild respiratory one. It's always combined with IBR in the vaccines, and I'll show you a couple examples of vaccines in a minute here that have these in it. BVD, bovine virus diarrhea, is the other one. Across Canada, we see it. I think vaccination has gone a long, long ways into preventing this disease, because it can be fatal if you get this diarrhea in the feedlot, and it also can cause, as you see there, abortions, fetal mummification, defects, or these persistently infected calves that shed the virus. When cows are exposed to BVD when they're pregnant, at certain times of pregnancy, these different things will come up. So they may abort, they may have those mummies, they may have these defects, or they might be persistently infected. Also incriminated in the respiratory disease complex, it's one of the viruses that's incriminated in there in the feedlot. So commonly in the vaccines, and it's usually in these what we call 5-way vaccines, which will have the IBR, PI3, as I mentioned, BVD types 1 and 2. They used to have just a type 1. They've added in a type 2, so that makes it a 4-way. And then BRSV, or a respiratory syncytial virus, that can cause problems in young calves or recently weaned calves, that sort of thing. So those are commonly in a 5-way vaccine, which is standard practice in my eyes across Canada.
Okay, I think Roy just lost his connection, so he's now offline. I think he'll have to log back in and start again.
So just wanted to kind of do a vaccination summary. I'm going to take about another 10 minutes, hopefully, to just kind of slowly wind down through this. If there's any questions, Linda, they can be posed to me, and then I'll answer questions, and then hopefully get into the parasite summary at the end. So I'm going to point with the mouse here and the pointer. So as I mentioned, so calves, this is pretty much a standard across Canada. Talk to your local veterinarian. I'm not trying to say what you should and should not do, but they would be more aware of the if there's other diseases in your area that you have to vaccinate against. One thing you mentioned about in Manitoba, blackleg vaccine, the ones that have the multivalency, so this, again, Covaxin Plus, which is a 9-way vaccine, as an example, has Clostridium hemolyticum, which causes red water. And red water is a disease we see in Alberta in specific areas where people have to vaccinate both their calves and their cows more frequently than normal. And it's also a disease that will crop up when you have liver flukes damaging the liver. So I know Manitoba's had an issue with liver flukes in some areas. If you're in that area, again, talk to your veterinarian. They're going to want to probably have you put in Clostridium hemolyticum into your blackleg vaccine. Okay, so that's just something to really watch for. It's called red water. But typically the calves have the blackleg and that Histophilus or Haemophilus combined in one vaccination. So you can get those two things in one vaccine. And then your 5-way vaccine is these things here, IBR, PI3, BVD, BRSV, which, as you see, is often given to the cows as a 5-way vaccine. That's to prevent primarily those abortions and then pass that immunity onto the calves and the colostrum. The one good thing to remember if you're using modified live vaccines, the ideal time to give it to the cows is before, after calving and before breeding, so they've got good immunity through the whole pregnancy, because that's when these abortions and stuff can occur. So keep that in mind. I did not talk about Pasteurella and Mannheimia just for lack of time, but they're the two big respiratory diseases that are bacterial in nature and, again, crop up primarily at stressful events such as weaning. We see them in the feedlot. They're the ones that we use a lot of the antibiotics to control. But nowadays, the standard regime is to use these bacterial Pasteurella and Mannheimia bacterial pneumonias, and together with the viral ones that are incriminated in pneumonia here. So these, and often, and I'll just show you a picture of a product Merck has called Vista Once, which actually has all 7 things in. So it's got the 5 viral things that I've mentioned and the 2 bacterial pneumonia, so that's a 7-way. So that way the calves, by giving 2 shots, blackleg Histophilus, and the other shot for the 5-way virals, the 2 bacterials, you've got everything basically covered. The cows, again, as I mentioned, that 5 ways what you're going to give before breeding, after calving. Blackleg, again, it depends on the area. If you've got more tetanus, if you've got that red water, you're going to go at least yearly. In some areas in Alberta, they go twice yearly with a blackleg vaccine that has red water in it, because otherwise the cows will get red water and die. So that's one, fine-tune that blackleg or Clostridial vaccination program with your veterinarian, because there's lots of differences out there, and you want to make sure you're covered for all those things. And even the 9-way vaccine is not a real expensive one, so a good thing to have in your repertoire of vaccinations that you do. So again, that would be to the cows before breeding. You give the 5-way. The blackleg really you'd probably give at turnout then, so you probably give it with the 5-way viral, and then the scour vaccine, of course, you're going to give closer to calving. So just to keep that all in mind. Yeah, and I just wanted to show you a picture. These are the vaccines that Merck has. The other companies has vaccines that are somewhat similar. They all have slight differences or slight differences in combinations. Again, talk to your veterinarian, local veterinarian, about either these vaccines or the ones that they're prescribing, so that you know what. And what's most important is that you've got the diseases in there that you want. So these things listed on the side, the actual diseases is what you want. The trade name is just a trade name, so you've got to find out what is in the vaccine. Another picture of the Vista Once, which has this sort of mountain vista in the background type of thing. Wanted to mention the bulls. Do not forget the bulls and the herd batteries. They're always neglected, if you like. They're a little harder to handle. We commonly give a lot of the vaccines at semen checking time, because that's one of the few times a year when you're really handling your bulls. But don't forget them. Really, the only one that you don't want to give is, of course, the scour vaccine has no value in the bulls, but all the other ones should be vaccinated the same way that your cow herd is. So you get a few extra doses of the vaccine when you're vaccinating the cows. Remember to give it to the bulls. And really important to find out the vaccination protocol those bulls, those purebred bulls, have when you bring them to your farm, because they hopefully have been started. Most purebred breeders are very conscientious and have it right up to date, but it's just one thing to think about. And I always mention about foot rot. At our practice, over the years, we gave a lot of foot rot vaccine, primarily to the bulls, just because we don't let them down during the breeding season. So I think so I just wanted to summarize, and I've maybe gone a little too fast. Sorry, just talking into this vacuum here. I have a tendency to talk a little bit faster, but and I will make this slide thing available to MAFRE if some of you want to go over it later, or if that choice is available to you. So in summary, the vaccines are your best biosecurity program. The dollars invested, look after them. Again, don't freeze them. Protect them when you're vaccinating. Don't cross-vaccinate or switch syringes. Vaccinate one on top of the other, that type of thing. You want to get the best bang for your buck and the best protection, and the only way we can do that is to make sure the vaccine gets into them in a good place that can be utilized by them. There's multiple vaccines available. Select the ones that best fit your farm from what diseases you need and the amount of, try to minimize the shots. I always think of that. If you can minimize the needles you give, it's just a little bit less work. So if you get these ones that have more things in them, that's better. And as a result, minimizing your shoot passes. Most of the vaccines now are 2 cc. Some are still 5. To me, that's just extra work. So if you can get a vaccine that's lower dose, it does the same bang for the buck, go with that one, because you'll just have to fill the syringe less and it's less work for you, and it's as efficacious. So trust your veterinarian. You're sometimes not comparing apples to apples when you compare the price of vaccines. What is in the vaccine versus what does it cost, and with the dose sizes and all those things, they can help you work out so that you can get the best bang for your buck when you're vaccinating your cows, and don't forget the bulls. So with that, Lynn, I'm kind of ready for some questions. If not, I'll just get my other seminar up here.
Okay, we don't have any questions as of right now, but if anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, they can just type them in, and we can go through that at the end of the next one.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I've gone through kind of fast, and there might be some. So so you want me to just carry on now to the second one?
Yeah, sure, may as well. I don't have any questions, so you may as well carry on.
Yep. Okay, and again, if anybody has questions they want to type in specifically to their own herd or their own area, by all means do that. Even and now even that we're going through the parasite study that Merck did and what we found basically in Manitoba, if you've got any questions on vaccines, by all means type them in as well, because I'd be happy to try to answer them specifically for you. So
okay, Roy, I just got a question here. If you want to do that before we get going. When do you vaccinate mature bulls for foot rot?
Okay, yeah, the question is, when do you vaccinate mature bulls for foot rot? The foot rot vaccine is very similar to other vaccines. It should have a booster shot with it. So typically what I see in some of the areas are bigger purebred guys are actually selling the bulls with 2 vaccines so that the vaccine is good for kind of a year. What I kind of recommend, the best time is probably, and it just kind of happens to work out that way, when you're semen evaluating just before breeding season, because really it's most critical, of course, that you have the protection against foot rot during the breeding season and the bull doesn't become lame. And quite frankly, after that, if you get a little bit of foot rot, probably isn't the end of the world. So if you can do it fairly close to when the breeding season starts, that would be ideal, and that's usually right at semen evaluating time for the majority of people. So the herd bulls, I do them at semen evaluating and as close to breeding season as you could. It takes 7 to 10 days to get immunity, so kind of in that time frame, if it's even a month before breeding season, that would be fine.
Okay.
So I'll just go on. Okay, Linda. Okay, I'll just go on to the presentation here, and I've titled this, in Manitoba, parasites. I didn't put parasites on it. They're eating us out of house and home, and are they? And do we or do we not know that? And I think parasites, and we've all heard and read the stories in the States, about parasite resistance and increase in internal parasites down there. And I think in Canada we probably felt that wasn't a big issue up here. We do have the lice issue that we can see and see the lice during the winter. We know we've got to treat them for that. Parasites were something that we probably every once in a while would run across, but it wasn't a big deal. Veterinarians really didn't look at it that close. But actually, as we're looking into this deeper and deeper, we're finding more and more parasites are out there. This is internal worms now. We can check them out by doing fecal flotations, and the clinics can do these for you to find out what the load is in your herd. And the other thing that
Roy, can you hear us still? Oh no, now Roy has gone offline again. So it looks like he's lost his connection, so he'll have to log back in and get going again.
they're definitely out there, and I'll show you in a second the incidents in specifically Manitoba. But the thing that we found over the years is kind of felt that the Canadian winters would arrest, and it does kind of arrest the transmission of parasites, but these larvae can survive, not the eggs, but the larvae can survive on the pastures for a year, and they can survive over the winter in, manure packs, under grass mats, and the snow acts as a good insulation. So they're tough little hombres, and that's where the cattle can get, even though they can be pretty clean going out to pasture, can get reinfected in the pasture. And that's why our strategies, I think, have to change, because we do typically deworm, or we used to treat for lice and, again, the worms with the porondecticides in the fall that we still have to do to try to get it to as low as we can over the winter. But then we might have to think about trying to implement something in the summer so that as these parasites are picked up, that they are killed too, so you get better gains over the summer as well. So it's one thing to think about. And this just shows what the parasitologists or the veterinary technicians at their clinics are looking at when they do these flotations. These are a whole bunch of gastrointestinal nematode eggs, different species. You'll see slightly different shapes, but we lump them all into one category. There's a great big worm egg that we can tell is a different species, so we can separate that out when we do the counts. And it's a real significant one, so we want to find it as well. But this one's pretty loaded, and you can imagine that those are adult worms producing these eggs. So as a result, they're robbing the cattle of nutrients over the grazing periods primarily. So, and they do rob animals of nutrition. This is the best slide I had, which happens to be bison, which are really susceptible to parasites. So if any of you have neighbors that are bison producers or have bison yourself, they're really ones you have to watch the parasites on, because they can really run them down and actually physically kill them. These were a bunch that had, a few had died out of this pen where we were able to luckily diagnose it, and you can see the one on the far right there has basically his pelvis showing, which is a real thin bison. And these are also kind of mid-summer, probably June time. They should be all pretty much shed out by now if they were healthy, so that's another indication. A little easier to tell on bison than cattle maybe, but again, they lack that glossy look to them, that really healthy look. So as a result, we can tell it that they're parasitized. This is a chart that we use, and for any of you that get results from a clinic or from a lab, these are eggs per 3 grams. And what I basically just want you to remember, don't worry about memorizing this chart, but if you see any numbers that are above 10, that's usually an indication that they're into the moderate to high category. So 10 eggs per 3 gram or higher, probably higher than 10, I guess. What we're talking about is that could be economically significant to your cattle. So in other words, if you deworm them, you're probably going to get into that, and I've got studies to show you here, but in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 pounds. Again, it's going to depend on the level of parasites and the nutrition level and all that sort of thing as to how much gain you're going to get over the other ones. But that's sort of what we're talking about. I like to put this slide on because if you look at these cattle, you can see how fat the cows are. This is kind of mid to later summer on some young bull calves, purebred bull calves that are at pasture. And I would have never guessed in a million years that these had parasites. But when we went in and checked them, and this cow herd has been on a fairly strict ivermectin program, primarily in the fall, late fall, so they're coming out to pasture. We thought pretty much zero, but these cattle had 40 eggs per 3 grams. So you see that at the bottom. Maybe it's a little hard to see the typing, but right down here, 40 eggs per 3 gram. Remember, I mentioned anything above 10. So again, are these cattle unhealthy? No, but they're gaining quite well. Yes, but they could do even better if they were dewormed. So if these cattle were dewormed right now, and primarily with, and I'll show you in a minute, a product that we kind of use in combination with ivermectin that will take the parasites down to pretty much zero, they will gain better on pasture. So the next year, this was just found out this fall, this producer is going to deworm them on pasture in the minerals. So Merck Animal Health did a fairly extensive trial with a feedlot consultant in in Alberta. And I apologize, there's no Manitoba data on this particular one, but I will show you some Manitoba data in a minute here. This is showing the eggs per 3 grams again, as I mentioned. So we're keeping everything consistent of just various herds, various pastures across both Alberta and Saskatchewan. So a wide geographic area. And you can see fairly wide results. So if we look at Vulcan here, pretty low results, wouldn't be worth deworming that herd versus we go up into Alder Flats into kind of central west Alberta, which is an area, by the way, where they have that Clostridium hemolyticum I mentioned. High parasite levels, so deworming them, or at Three Hills over here, they would definitely get an economic return by a long shot on using a deworming product. These were done two consecutive years, so there are even 2 pastures. Vulcan shows up again here at 16, so you can see that, you know, again, fairly low, consistent year to year, and other ones are fairly high year to year. So Manitoba is going to be the same, or even probably a little more, just with all the water. Moisture is one that will add to parasite transmission. So anytime you get that, plus we can add in lungworms there. All these things come into play whether we should deworm or not. So these are those same cattle coming off a pasture, and it doesn't really matter the rep number of which pasture they came from. What it's showing is the parasite numbers before treatment and after treatment. And this is comparing ivermectin poron, so your straight normal sort of Ivamec, Bimectin, all these different Normectin, all these products that you're probably commonly using. What they found in the States is they were developing resistance to the ivermectin or macrocytic lactones, all the ones that are in that family. And anything, so if you look at the column here where it says fecal egg count resistance, any number that's below 90 is considered that the parasites are developing resistance to that product, because otherwise if a dewormer is effective, it should knock out at least 90+% of the parasites in order to be effective. Otherwise, they just build up again. We had one that was close to 88, but you can see some even up into the down into the 59 range, which means that for every 100 parasites that were in that animal, only 59% of them were removed with the ivermectin product. So in other words, in the fall now when you're going back to treating and you use that product, still effective against lice, so we still have to use it on all our ranches and farms, but it's only removing half, or maybe up to 80-some% of the parasites. So there's still those other ones left that are drawing down on the animal, both nutritionally and from an immunity standpoint. Now, if we combine that on the column on the right, these were, again, reps, so the same kind of pasture. They still did a fecal count. You can see they're pretty similar. When cattle come out of pasture, even though you sample, differences in sampling and how the amount of manure you get and which side of the manure pack and all that, you're going to get a variation of 10 to 20%. That's why at 118 it's high, 139 from the same pasture. So it's within reason, the testing. But the important point to note here is this is when they combine the ivermectin with fenbendazole or Safeguard. So another family of dewormer, totally different family than the macrocytic lactones. So by combining the 2 dewormers together, these numbers almost look too good to be true, but it's what they came up with. It was 100% reduction in parasites. So it took the worm load down to literally 0. And the only way that could build up again is, of course, if they go back onto the spring pasture and pick up worms again the following year. And this I wanted to mention, Heather Davis is our rep, and I think she's online listening in Manitoba, our field representative for Merck Animal Health, and all the other names there are just different. That's how we can kind of tell the different provinces. So this is basically Manitoba, which is Heather, compared to what we found in the rest of the country. And these were the fecal egg counts on grass yearlings across the board. And so she had a herd with a high of 63 and one with a low of 10. So just kind of within the confines of doing them with an average of about 30. Derek, if you look up there, there's our rep from Ontario. It's wet. They've used that Safeguard product there for a number of years because parasites are a real issue in in Ontario as well, and you can see the level. So parasites across the country from basically Quebec. None were done in the Atlantic provinces. We didn't get out there, but basically from Quebec west to BC. These are all represented here, and you can see there's parasites all over the place. Those were the grass yearlings. And then I must have covered up the other side. The calves were just the same but slightly more. So we did calves, and what we did was we went in and sampled 20 from each herd. So we got a good representative sample because cattle will carry parasites differently. Some will carry lots, some will carry not that many. Really what you're concerned with is the average. What is the overall herd doing as far as if you can, if it's beneficial to deworm and take away that worm count. Now this is the fecal egg count reduction test, so sort of that percentage reduced. And this is across Canada. This isn't done yet, but this is going in and taking samples when the producer is going to treat, and then marking down what treatment was given, and then going back 2 weeks later to seeing what percentage of the worms were removed. So, and again, as I mentioned, anything over 90% is what you want. This is what we've compared with what we've got so far. 34 submissions have been done with the ivermectin porons, and again, that varies anywhere from Ivomec to all the other ones that are out there. And then we had a couple Dormectin, which was actually injectable, and then Ivermec, and that, again, different ivermectins, and the Safeguard, the fenbendazole. And you can see
It looks like Roy has lost his connection again, so we'll have to wait for him to connect back in to get going again.
need of deworming. I did some percentages, and was I off for a little bit there? I see it says network connection has been reestablished. But anyway,
yeah, we lost your sound for a bit there.
How long do you think? Do you want me to go back?
Yeah, it was back when you were talking about the comparison of the Poron and then the combination with the Safeguard.
Okay. Okay. Right here, probably?
Yeah, I think it was the next slide. We were talking about that one, and then I think it was the next slide.
Right. Yep. This one here? Okay.
Maybe the next one. No.
Okay. Probably I'll start.
Yeah, sure.
I'll start here if you want. I can. Does that look right? That's when we use the fenbendazole 100%? Okay. I apologize if I guess we just have a little bit of glitches here. I just got cut off somehow on the sound. So I may be repeating a little bit, but if not, I've got a few minutes as I talk fast again this time. So I'll start right here. But basically this slide showed the fecal egg count reductions from those cattle or those pastures where I just showed the amounts of fecal or egg count contamination. And when you use the important columns to watch for, remember I mentioned anything over above 90% is kind of what you're striving for, where there's no resistance. And this was the pastures where they gone and given ivermectin, by itself, and then they went back 2 weeks later and checked to see what percentage of parasites had been removed. And you can see that really varied depending on the pasture, but anywhere from a high of 88 but down to a low of 59. So almost, at 59, almost half of the parasites were not removed in that particular case. So that means depending on what the worm load was, and in this case, if we kind of go, you can see that we were at 101 and then it reduced to 41. So still substantially over that magic 10 mark that I mentioned. So these cattle technically still should be dewormed to get the producer a bang for the buck, and that's where the combination, when we look at fenbendazole or Safeguard, and it's a product Merck has had for 25, 30 years, but when the poron ivermectins and stuff came on, kind of eliminated it a little bit from the market because of ease and that sort of thing, and we felt efficacy, and I think efficacy in the ivermectins was pretty good initially. But over time, there's been more and more resistance starting to build up to it, and it's been used a lot. And with the price coming down, it's used probably more frequently than it used to be. But you can see when you combine the fenbendazole, the FBZ there, which is the Safeguard. This was suspension, although there's different ways you can get it into them. But this was suspension that was given orally with a hook applicator. I'll show you in a minute. Together with the ivermectin poron, you had literally 100%. Well, you did have 100% protection in this particular study with all the parasites, meaning the parasites now coming off grass in the fall, if those two products are used in combination, your worm load is 0, and they're not going to, if they're going into a dry lot housing and not pastured anymore, they're not going to pick up any of the parasites over the winter. And then you're going to have to worry about it in the spring when they go out to the pasture again. As I mentioned, the larvae can't survive on the pasture. So, yeah, and then this was the grass yearling survey that we did across Canada. So this was Merck again doing this study. Heather Davis, the Tech Services representative in Manitoba. So you've got basically Manitoba in green comparing to the other provinces. Our other reps are represented there by their names. So you can see in the herds that Heather did, and quite frankly, I want to mention that all the representatives, these are pretty well-managed herds that they sampled, because it was the herds that the veterinarians recommended they do that are sort of, you know, up and coming, or people that are kind of leading edge and really want to know what's going on type of thing. So overall, they were quite well-managed herds, I felt, across Canada that were sampled. So you can see we're still running into parasite levels up into the 60. Heather had a low of 10 and then an average of 30. So all kind of over that 10 threshold, making it economical to deworm. And this is the fecal egg count reduction test. So that trial I just showed you, this is one that Merck has done on the herds that we sampled. Again, this is across Canada, so Heather's work in Manitoba will be in these numbers, where we compared herds that were just given ivermectin poron, and so we sampled them again when they were done and 2 weeks later, right as they were done, and then 2 weeks later to see what the reduction was. And there's a couple with dormectin on there, and then ivermectin products and Safeguard. There was 8 that were already used in the combination, and you can see by the percent efficacy over on the right that the Safeguard and ivermectin was at 100%, and the others varied from about 70 to 77%. So some resistance or lack of efficacy there, indicating, again, you're going to have to look at the worm load. So, you know, in other words, these dormectin ones were still quite low. you know, and it's kind of funny as we look across Canada, even if they've got high parasite numbers, the percent or low parasite numbers, the percent efficacy doesn't change a lot compared to if there are lots of parasites. So you'd think if they only had a few parasites, the product would work on all of them and you'd have 100% reduction, but that's not the case. The dormectin herds, though, quite frankly, you know, the parasite levels are low enough that you probably wouldn't go in with another product there, but all of the ivermectin ones were. So worthwhile, you know, you can see post-treatment they were still at 11, so they're still at a level where, you know, it'd be efficacious to deworm them and get those better gains on the cattle. This is nursing calves again, Heather, in the green here in Manitoba. Again, numbers that are pretty high. She had a couple herds where they're quite low, and I think I got cut off here. Maybe this is where I came on. I wanted to mention, too, if you are sampling young calves, you want to do it when they're a little bit older and onto grass and eating grass, because that's when they get the parasites. So if you do them too young, and I'm not saying Heather sampled this one herd when it was young, but that's one possibility that can happen if they're still just sucking milk and not really eating grass yet. We have to watch that and make sure we sample them when they've sucked up those parasites from the grass, because that's when they get them in the summer. So if we're checking in the summer, you know, midsummer is pretty good time to check them to see what they're doing and what the levels are, and then you can go ahead and deworm them. And that safeguard, I've mentioned about the drench, and I'll just show in a minute how that's given. But you can be scripted in by your veterinarian in minerals over a 3 to 6 day period, so it's fairly easy to get it into them in the pasture, or it can be put in crumbles and feed, or there's different ways that you can get the product into them. And you can see they tolerate, this is a hook applicator that's just given to a bison calf, and it wasn't those ones that I showed you earlier, but there's a safeguard hanging up. This is kind of in the cold of the winter, so we've got to put some things that prevent the product from freezing in it, but it can be done in fairly cold weather as well. This is a bigger hook applicator that you can come from the side. The cattle don't mind this very much, and they don't throw their heads, and you're kind of off to the side, so fairly easy to do and not too cumbersome, and not a lot of work, really. Not a lot longer than it takes to pour on ivermectin. But again, in the fall, you'll be putting both of those products on, the ivermectin and the safeguard, to take that worm load right down to 0 if you've got parasite levels. And again, Manitoba being fairly wet, I know you have some issues with lungworms, and we do in Alberta as well. And you see this periodically. Certain pastures seem to be worse. Wetter times seem to be worse. But the safeguard will work against lungworms as well. This lungworms is one thing that can kill the cattle if they get it bad enough, and I have seen it bad enough in bison to kill them as well, so they get it as well. For comparison here, this is just the point of a pen, so these can be seen with the naked eye. This isn't under any kind of magnification. This is way down the windpipe, way down into the airways in the lungs. So that's cut lung you see, and those are those little lungworms in the bronchi down into the lungs. And I'm just going to end with my big question mark cow, and I think I'm probably a little bit early. I probably could have put some more in there, but I talked fairly fast, so I can, if there are any questions specific to worm counts or suggested deworming protocols or that type of thing, by all means type them in.
Okay, thanks, Roy. As of right now, we don't have any questions, so maybe if they come through in the next couple minutes, I will relay them on to you. But if not, I'll unmute Lionel here as well. I think he's got a few closing comments as well.
Okay. Do you want me to add anything else in, or we're good? I kind of covered it. I mean, I could always elaborate on some more stuff, but that's good because he's got some closing comments. Perfect.
Okay, I think Lionel's got a question for you, so he's unmuted now. Lionel, you can go ahead. Lionel, it's not coming through. Nope, still can't hear you.
How about now?
Oh, there. Now I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Roy, some of the producers have been putting ivermectin on in the spring on the calves when they go to pasture. Does that have any effect on controlling some of the parasites, or so basically they're getting 2 applications a year, or is that really not doing anything at all?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if anybody, should I just repeat the question?
Sure.
Do you want me to, or could it,
yeah, no,
have heard that? Okay, yeah, again, the question for everybody listening was from Lionel, and a lot of people are putting on a pour-on insecticide in the spring, and is that going to help control the parasites? That's probably a 2-faceted answer to that question. Yeah, with the price of them coming down, they are being used more and more, but
Roy, I think we lost your sound again.
Well, I guess we're, first of all, I'd like to apologize for the way that it's worked today. It normally works really well, so we just had some issues with the sound there. I'd like to thank Dr. Roy Lewis for presenting. It was a lot of really good information. And I guess just a couple of closing slides here. If you got questions or if you have any ideas regarding the cattle chat, you can either get a hold of myself or Linda Rickman, who's the EC here at Maffrey in Souris, or there's the Southwest.
Essentially, they should be almost 0. Okay, am I just established now? Hello?
Yeah, you're there, Roy. If you want to start with your answer, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll start. Okay, so anyway, the answer to Lionel's question is it's kind of a 2-faceted answer. If there's an issue with people using ivermectins in the spring, where they have been using it, the efficacy is probably going to be the same as what it is in the fall. So if it's only taken out 50% or 70% of the worms, it's going to do the same in the spring. If you use a safeguard in the fall, with the ivermectins, the parasite load should be taken to literally 0, so there'll be also 0 coming out in the spring. And then you'd probably be best to use something like safeguard on pasture once they've been out on pasture for a month or so, and they've gathered up some of those larvae and they become adults in the spring. The other second, and why I want to make it a second faceted approach, I used to kind of foo-foo the fact that the dung beetle was being destroyed by the ivermectin products until it's been the last 4 or 5 years. I kind of noticed, boy, a lot of these cow patties seem to stay evident throughout, throughout a lot of the summer out on the pastures, and basically it's a lot of that is to do with the ivermectin type, those macrocytic lactones destroying the dung beetle, and then they don't roll the manure up into little balls and bury it and sort of recycle, if you like. So with time, if we don't do the ivermectins in the spring and just again use the safeguard in the summer, that will help that situation as well. Different situation, I realize, but it reestablishes the pasture and helps fertilize and that sort of thing. So both things to think about for sure. So that's it for that. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. What about a safeguard then in the spring before they go to pasture? That would be kind of like, does it have any residual effect or last for a while, or that's better just to give it a crumble or something?
Yeah, as far as the safeguard, the residual, no, it doesn't have a residual effect. It basically kills the parasites within a day, so it's very, very quick acting, and then it's out of their system. Hence, it's got a quite short withdrawal for slaughter being 10 or 13 days, depending on what product it's in. But so it doesn't have that, and that's where if you do use it in the fall and your parasite load is down to 0, probably not a big advantage to give it right at spring at turnout, because again the cattle are literally 0. If they haven't been done in the fall, probably not a bad idea to do it at the spring at turnout to get them to 0 going out onto the pasture, so they're not you want them going out to the pasture as low as you can, so they're not spreading more larvae out to, or eggs that become larvae out on the pasture. So that's what you want to try to minimize. So, and that recommendation would be to wait and do them midsummer, or after they've been out a month or 6 weeks in the mineral.
Okay. Well, Andrea, is there any other questions that have come up for Roy?
No, I don't have any other questions here.
Okay, Roy, well, thank you very much for attending the webinar here today. A lot of really good information, and I hope we'll be able to get you back for a few of these webinars on different topics throughout the season here.
No, I enjoy doing it, Lyle, and I say I'm not sure what the glitch thing was with going in and out, but we'll figure that out anyway. It wasn't too bad. You were able to get me back right away, so that's great.
Yeah, well, and we'll try to figure that out too. Sometimes you get a glitch and you can't figure it out for a week, and then you got it figured out. So anyway, thanks again, and I'd like to thank Heather Davis for helping out too. And again, we're planning on having these once a month, so you'll be getting invites again for the people that were involved today, and also for if you know anybody else that'd be interested in watching, just get them to get a hold of us, and we'll get them the link for getting on. So thanks, and I think we'll end the webinar for today.
Thank you. Okay, bye.